Former USDA appointee under the Biden administration is heading across South Dakota to do what she says the state's congressional delegation won't, which is hold town halls with constituents.
Our Grant Green was at today's announcement and has more for us tonight here at 6.
Today, a former South Dakota Department of Agriculture representative announced that she's going to be doing some town halls around the state in Rapid City, Sioux Falls, and Vermillion to try to make up for the job that she says South Dakota's current congressional delegation is not doing.
Nikki Gronley, a former Biden appointee for the department's Rural Development Program, shared serious frustration with reckless chainsaw cuts from the Trump administration and DOGE.
Our elected officials have ceded their authority to Elon Musk and DOGE. Individuals who do not have congressional approval, proper security clearance, and don't even have the knowledge of what our government's departments do.
Gronley says these cuts have been dangerous for South Dakotans and people around the country.
They have eliminated critical government functions, such as we learned just this week. The branch from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention that monitors lead exposure in children and tracks it nationwide.
Joining her on the trip, Democratic Party Executive Board member Julian Bodewan, who is disappointed in the lack of transparency and interaction from South Dakota's members of Congress.
Our members of Congress are not as strong as we may have hoped or believed that they were at one point in time. We're not talking about the strength of a Tim Johnson or the strength of a Daschle.
As these town hall meetings kick off next Monday, the two aim to foster conversations that reach across party lines, no matter the topic.
If you're interested in attending these meetings, the first one will be in Rapid City at 7 o'clock at the Doll Arts Center. The very next day, also at 7 o'clock, there will be another one on Augustana University's campus. In Sioux Falls, Grant Green, Dakota News Now.